Welcome, Hatep and Ma'at. That means I'm offering you truth. I'm Aust NeferKa. And before I go any further, I want to ask my beloved elder, Mama Regina, do I have your permission to speak?
Yes, you do.
Give thanks. So I want to welcome everyone who's here with us live. If you're here for the raw play and you're not live, welcome nonetheless. You can still feel free to comment in the comments. But if you are here with us live, please feel free to engage with us in the chat. It is a talk show. So if you have any comments or questions, put them into the chat and we usually like to engage those. If it's your first time here, welcome to Professor and Priestess. I am the priestess. Mama Regina is the professor. And this episode is preparing the people for power. This is all about preparing for power. This is the episode on our pillar of sovereignty. So, if you haven't been here for previous episodes, then you won't know. Season 1 of Professor and Priestess is all about revolution being the only solution. Okay. And we've been going through the 11 pillar platform of Tehuti Ma'at, which is inspired by the 10-point platform of the Black Panther Party, which Mama Regina is one of the original. She's an OG Panther. So, Mama Regina, can you introduce yourself to our listening audience, those who are not who may not be here, they might be here for the first time?
Sure. Yeah, as Aust NeferKa mentioned, I am an original member of the Black Panther Party for self-defense in Oakland, California. And it's so interesting to me when I think about that because I'm a Philadelphia girl. I'm a Philadelphia native. I grew up in Philadelphia. But as a teenager, I caught a late plane to Oakland, California to join Huey and Bobby. I was a teenager at that time, and I honestly didn't think about any danger, any fear, any holdbacks. I thought about nothing but to help those brothers. Now I didn't know how I was going to help them. I mean, I was a joint smoking, a cocaine sniffing, teen, an average kind of a adventurous teen. That's what Bobby Seale used to call me, adventurous. But it's like I knew I had to go. I absolutely knew I had to go there. I did not realize how it would, in fact, change my life right up to this point. There's not a day that has gone by since those many decades ago when I joined the Black Panther Party that I don't think about them. And in fact, I learned to love literature while in the Black Panther Party for self-defense. I learned to love school because I despised it when I had to go to it. So the Panthers were very much a part of my life then, and they are a part of my life now. And their teaching structure just informed me about my relationship to Africa, which I did not know. I absolutely did not know. And they taught me to, I guess, search for a truth that was denied to us in America. So I am a professor. I've written several books and many articles, and I've hooked up with the good sister. I'm looking at your full name, Aust NeferKa. I've hooked up with her because she's such a dynamic teacher when it comes to Mejuneter, when it comes to understanding the spirituality in ancient Kemet. And because this kind of learning is not taught in any schools here in America, then, I've been studying this on my own. And so since she is a high priestess, it's a pleasure to be here with her as we, in fact, translate that ancient saga, that legacy. Because actually, even what I didn't realize when I caught that plane to join Huey and Bobby, that I was stepping into an ancient heroic tradition that comes straight out of Africa, something that I actually write about. So I feel like I am discovering and rediscovering lost memory by being involved with Tehuti Ma'at.
Ashe, give thanks, Mama Regina. For me, it's just such an honor. It's a privilege. It's a pleasure to connect with you and to have your counsel. So for me, it's just been such a beautiful connection, divinely aligned, of course. And I feel like it's just amazing that we're able to have this opportunity to share it. For those who don't know, this series coming out was like kind of like one day to the next. It's like, okay, when do you want to start? Let's start on Tuesday. It's a full moon. And it was like, and the rest is history. And we've been here every Tuesday since, committed to it. So this season is we're gonna go through the 11 pillars, and then we'll pause and we'll come back for another season. But it's just, I'm just so thankful for this. For those who don't know me, I am Aust NeferKa. I am the mother of Tehuti Ma'at, which is a revolutionary instrument focused on building revolutionary cooperative institutions in the areas of healing, art, and education. So we service as a resource mechanism to foster the political, economic, and cultural liberation and empowerment of people of African ascent. And if you want more information about that, then you can go to tehutimaat.org, which is on the bottom of the screen. You can also go to Mama Regina's website, which is apanthersister.com. Mama Regina is also an author, and she has written several very powerful books that you can support on her website. So I do encourage you to support our beloved elder, Mama Regina. I know she looked real young because I don't think people realize you're really an elder, Mama Regina. So that being said, I do want to shout out, if you are here with us live, please engage in the chat. That's the privilege of being here live with us. I want to shout out our brother Jadorian, who be in the house consistently. So respect to you, brother. We are glad to have you here with us. And for everyone else who's watching, please feel free to engage in the chat. Any questions you have, and we will gladly respond and involve you in the dialogue. So that being said, Mama Regina, I would love for us to begin with answering what is sovereignty, right? And I think that I want to hand this to you because it really is the epitome of what the Black Panther Party was all about, because it was the call for Black power. You know, I remember Nana Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, creating that chant for Black power, and that being like the sound that reverberated throughout the Black world, throughout the African world. And the Black Panther Party really took that to the next level, right? So what is sovereignty? How would you describe sovereignty? What is sovereignty to you? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry. There you go.
Okay. Sovereignty to me, the epitome of sovereignty, I believe, came out of the Black Panther Party. Now, there were reaches for sovereignty prior to the Black Panther Party. When you think about the Marcus Garvey movement, when you think about the Nation of Islam, even though they murdered my hero Malcolm X, I had to stop and pause with that because one of the books I'm reading right now is about Betty, all about Betty, and it's called Surviving Malcolm X. And I had to revisit the murder, the assassination of Malcolm X just today, and it's just walked with me because I pretty much walk with Malcolm every day, you know, and even Malcolm was creating something that displayed sovereignty because his organization of Afro-American Unity, sovereignty. His Muslim Mosque Incorporated, sovereignty. So that notion of sovereignty, you know, it carried forward into the Black Panther Party for self-defense because, in fact, it had existed prior to Huey and Bobby, putting that organization together. And good Lord, every time I think, and I really want the audience to understand this, just like you see me right now and you see Sister Neff, and we're in different places. This is when technology is good. All right. We're in different places, but we're together. And you out there who are watching this, you're probably in different places and you can see us and hear us. But it's only me and her that are talking. Just like in 1965, 66, it was just Bobby and Huey. That's it. Two courageous brothers looked at the situation in America as it was affecting Black people. Two men, that's all people. They had decided, they had been in study groups, Soul Students Advisory Council, which was a precursor to today's Black Student Union. And they were studying Black history. And they were studying what was going on in Africa at the time, because many of the colonized nations, just like now, me and Neff will probably talk about that a little later, they were demanding taking their freedom, you see. And so the brothers looked at how the police in particular, they come into the Black community, they would snatch any brother that they thought that they should snatch, and they would beat him in front of his family, in front of his friends, in front of his children. I even witnessed that in Philadelphia. So these brothers, they said, now we done marched, and King had was King killed by then? No, Malcolm had been killed. King was still alive. But they looked at how marching was not getting the results that they wanted. Okay. And they came up with the idea that we're just going to have to do more. We're going to actually have to be revolutionaries in the sense of Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, and other revolutionaries, men in particular who put their lives on the line. They wanted to be and were soldiers for Black people because they felt and believed that what Black people needed was a Black army. That was the answer, because they knew if in self-defense the police grabbed you, you know, you had a constitutional right to resist brutality. Now, two men having a meeting, talking about this. Bobby Seale was working. Bobby had just gotten out of the Air Force, I believe it was. Some branch of it. Yeah, it was the Air Force. Huey was doing all kinds of incredible things in Oakland. He was learning the law and he was testing the law as well. In fact, Huey was kind of doing what Malcolm X did prior to going to jail and then becoming an intellectual. Huey was, you know, he was doing little petty crime things, going before judges and testing how well he knew the law and could, in fact, not get charged with a particular kind of a crime. That was Huey, okay? Bobby was a married man. He had a child and everything. His wife, Artie, had just had a baby and everything. But Bobby had decided that he was going to take the little money that he made and he was going to get an office. And they both decided, particularly Huey, that it should be called the Black Panther Party for self-defense. So these two brothers knew that in order to really help Black people, that they had to be sovereign, that they had to have their own office, that they had to have their own phone, that they had to give their entire lives to a new movement that would challenge the kind of lynching and brutality that Black men and women in this country had been going through since the eradication of physical chattel slavery. So they went from building uh, a headquarters, to also looking at what the people needed, what the poor Black people needed in Oakland, California. And then they supplied it. The Oakland kids, the Oakland children were going to school hungry. So they created the Breakfast for School Children program. And they did that without going to any politician and saying, well, can you give me, can you pass a law? Can you get, fuck that. What they did was look at the infrastructure. I shouldn't curse, but what the hell? They looked at the infrastructure of the Black community and said, well, these businesses that are in our community, they make money from the people in the community. So why shouldn't they give something back to the community? How novel. How novel. And so we got the free breakfast for school children program. And Sister Neff, what that did, it embarrassed the dirty, rotten, racist pig dogs who run this country and knew there were poor Black people and poor white people and poor Chicanos. That breakfast for school children program embarrassed the state to the point that to take that from the Black Panther Party for self-defense, the schools in years after implemented their own free breakfast for underprivileged children. But that was started by us. So I really
Yeah,
want people to understand that was the
that's
state,
very important.
right? Taking
Very
our idea, you see, and then implementing it. And throughout this entire country, you can't walk into a school that has a free lunch program or free breakfast program and see Huey and Bobby on the wall as the founders of such programs. So this is why, I'm talking to you as vitally as I am right now. Why? Because we must teach our children our true history and stop expecting for these white racist schools to teach our children what they really do need to know. So
touche.
that was
Yeah.
that was one part of sovereignty that came out of the Black Panther Party for me. And we had our own newspaper. Where did that come from? We had our own writers. When we and we didn't, trust me, we had no money.
Yeah. I
I
wanna
don't know how we did this, Sister Neff. I mean, when I really think about it now, how we move these programs forward, okay?
you know what it is? I'm so glad. So first of all, thank you for all of that because I think a lot of people don't know that that didn't exist before, right? Because a lot of people don't know that history. So or that's our story. Also, shout out to our sister Tanu in the house who said the state should be embarrassed. Yes, the state should be embarrassed. And the reality is, we have to recognize that the state, if it was in the interest of the state to actually do effective social services, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in right now, right? Like that's why we have to have this type of mobilization, right? For Tehuti Ma'at, we were inspired by the free breakfast program. Our organic food for the people program is inspired by the free breakfast program, and we wanted to revolve it
Shay.
and take it deeper and connect the children and anyone, adults, elders, to the land, teach them how to cultivate and grow their own food, health, nutrition. Our Raw Workshop program is a curriculum of several Raw workshops where we cover health and nutrition, um, farming, agriculture basics, as well as lifestyle, right? And just health, wellness. So I think that it set a foundation. And anyone who's in the position of truly wanting to experience holistic change, but specifically social change, is going to recognize that your love for the people will move you and you will move mountains
That's right.
with the love for your people.
That's right.
We we've done so much. People would not believe how much community service we have done with no money. No money. That's why when I hear people complaining about shit or these nonprofits, they have budgets. They have operational budgets.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have an operational budget. We try and get people
That's
to
right.
join membership so we can have an operational budget.
Okay.
But we still
Mm-hmm.
do everything that we do. We
Mm-hmm.
still run that garden. What? Volunteer. We're a volunteer run organization because the people who are involved. I saw a meme on Instagram that was really good. It was like I don't know if it was a Malcolm quote or it was a meme though, and it was like if the people are willing to do anything for money, but they're not willing to do anything for the people, right? Because people love
Mm.
money more than they love the people,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's the truth. Unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
we have misplaced loyalties, and we're not, and we're shifting. We're shifting into correcting that and taking the authority and the autonomy that's necessary for sovereignty, because power is the essence of sovereignty. But when we're afraid of power, for several reasons, some of us are afraid of power because we don't want the responsibility that comes along with it. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a suckle at the tip of the state, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to
Mm-hmm.
worry about certain things. And on the other side, some of us are afraid of what we would do with power because we've adopted these Eurocentric ideas around power. I can't tell you how many people I've heard quote, I don't remember who it was, the white man who said, a global minority, I want to be politically accurate in my expression, a global minority who said, power corrupts, absolute power
To
corrupts,
power.
absolute,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm gonna say that's not true. And
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
idea is what has us fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And the level of corruption that we experience is because of this unhealed power dynamic. And I always like to mention Brother Huey's definition of power, which is, so Huey P. Newton has this definition of power. Power is the ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. So, in order to define, you have to be able to think for yourself, right? Like it's essential. We don't recognize the dangers of just regurgitating information, the dangers of not thinking is what has us in the condition that we're in right now. So we have to be able to define for ourselves what is power. We have to be able to have that knowledge of self and orientation, right? That Sankofa. We've talked about this in previous episodes. If you haven't watched previous episodes, I really recommend you watch the series because we've covered a lot of ground already. But that Sankofa, going back to our legacy and bringing forward what we need to take us to the future, is so essential because when we go back to the 3 millennia of sacred leadership that existed in Kemet, that is a model. We're talking about 3 millennia of leadership. The divided states has only been around for a couple years. Like put that into context. We're talking about dynasties of power and the way that the European interprets that, whether it be through Egyptology or through the ideology of Eurocentrism, because you even have people of African ascent who adopt a Eurocentric mindset that is not holistic, that doesn't bring together the culture, the economics, the politics, right? We talked about Dr. Leonard Jeffries' pyramid analysis to give us an African-centered perspective and method of critical analysis. So when we're looking at the whole trifecta and we look at what we're dealing with something completely different. We're not dealing with, oh, they thought they were gods and they told them and they were corrupt and all of this. Yes, there was at a certain point, there's cycles, right? We had some peaks and we had some downfalls in leadership. However, the authority of the throne, because it was not about the person who sat on the throne, it was about the matrilineal legacy. And there's a distinction between matrilineal and matriarchal. The line was passed through the woman. This wasn't a woman-dominated culture. It was a culture where the moral and ethical system was Ma'at, balance. We talked about that, pillar 1. So episode 2, we talked all about Ma'at. So it's very important for us to recognize the balance of power between masculine and feminine energy, the way that that was embodied through leadership. Specifically, when you see the Nesubiti, which most people know as the pharaoh, you usually see that depiction of the Nesubiti holding the 2 scepters, right? The Hek and the Keka, that most people know as the crook and the flail, which are farming tools, representing that the person who was in the position of authority had to be what? Connected to the land, a cultivator, a steward of the land. And what did Malcolm tell us? Revolution is based on land. But those 2 symbols were representing the both masculine and feminine aspect, right? The right hemisphere of the brain operating the left side of the body, and the left hemisphere of the brain operating the right side of the body. And one being active and one being receptive. One was used to move and herd the cattle, and the other one was used to pull in. So it was showing how the masculine is active and the feminine is receptive, and how the person in authority had to be centered and whole in their power and authority. In addition to that symbolism in itself, you also had the Nesubiti carrying the crown with the twins, the vulture and the cobra on his crown, representing, even though there were times where we had females who operated in the position of Nesubiti on rare occasions, but it did happen. Our great queen Hatshepsut, which we mentioned on pillar 1, who is one of the ancestors who serves as the pillar of Ma'at, right, was a female who operated in the position of Nesubiti. Now, if we want to use Eurocentric terms like king and queen, I want us to be clear that it's different to have a woman king than to have a queen. Because the role of the queen, right, the wife of the Nesubiti, is a role in itself also. So when Hatshepsut took that position, she took the position of a male role, right? So she had to operate in her masculine energy in that role, because we recognize the power of the masculine and we validated that and we lifted that. But he still wore on his crown 2 feminine principles. One representing the mother, which was Mut, the vulture. The vulture will prick herself. If she cannot feed her young, she will prick herself to give them her blood. Selfless love is what Mut represents. It's a force, it's a principle of selfless love of the mother. So his authority comes from his mother. And on the other side, the cobra representing the divine feminine intuition, right? The cobra moves forward, backward, left, right, down, and up, right? So the dynamicism of energy and direction of the intuition also represents the flow of energy, right? The kundalini, as they call it, the wajet, right? The Sanskrit calls it the kundalini, for those who might be familiar with that tradition out of India. So what's really important about that is his authority also comes from his wife, right? The intuition of his wife, because she's operating in her divine feminine energy. So he can operate with an authority and active power that's necessary in his role as the divine masculine principle. So these are our bases of leadership and power and authority. So the sacrifice that had to be made in order to be in that position of leadership is one of, you had to embody divinity. So you can't do the same things other people are doing, right? So that you're not corrupted because you're operating at such a high frequency. That's not the type of leadership we have right now. We literally have an inversion of that. It's literally upside down. We have the people who are in positions of power and authority making decisions politically, especially, are pedophiles and the worst degenerates on the planet right now. All right. And Obviously, that might be a gross generalization because I can't say every single politician, right? But for the most part, yeah, that's the reality. That's the sad, disgusting reality. And it's known. It's like a common, you know, stereotype that politicians are corrupt, right? Like it's not like it's a stretch. So it's important for us to think about that because when we look at the foundation of Tehuti Ma'at, right, the pillars we're working on are building on a foundation of spiritual warriorship. And spiritual warriorship is about a healed leadership paradigm. It's about leaders who are healing, committed to healing themselves first to show up in a whole capacity, to be responsible with power. So that's a whole different dynamic. And that when we need that transformational leadership, we need transformational leadership models so that we can be ready to wield power. Because if we put people in positions of power who are leading others, who are only seeking self-gain, then we're going to be in another dangerous position. So it's very important for us to make sure that our leaders are supported, that our leaders are healing, right? So that's what we do inside the ARC, right? The African Rehabilitation Center is all about supporting and creating and developing healed leadership paradigms and systems so that leaders feel supported within that. So I don't want to go too deep into that because I don't know if you had anything you wanted to respond to that, Mama Regina.
I actually do, because you made me think about like the origins of the Black Panther Party, the early Black Panther Party in 1966, when Bobby Seale and Huey Newton wanted uh, um, Malcolm X's widow to come to California. She was to be interviewed by a writer named Eldridge Cleaver. He was working for Ramparts magazine. Now, Eldridge was a writer. He had been in jail, um, but he wrote Soul on Ice while he was in jail, and I think it became a bestseller. In any event, he had never really heard of the Panthers, but he went to the airport to escort Betty Shabazz. Malcolm has been murdered, to his, I believe it was in San Francisco, his office of Ramparts magazine. Well, he was expecting to just, pick up the good sister, the grieving widow of Malcolm. Lord have mercy. Do you know she was pregnant? She already had 4 girls. And when she watched her husband be shot down, she was pregnant with twins, and she didn't even know it was twins. Back then, we didn't know what we were having. We didn't have the sophisticated kind of equipment they have now. But in any event, Eldridge Cleaver comes to the airport to pick up Betty Shabazz. And here come these beautiful Panthers, led by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, Jack. And they were armed to the teeth. Why? Because it was legal to openly carry in California. And they felt that since they were the escorts for Malcolm X's widow, they should be armed. Well, you can imagine. Can you imagine? I think it was about 5 of the brothers walking, black leather jackets, black beret, and a shotgun. Can you imagine the airport personnel looking on them, coming through the gates, walking like I know they walked, to pick up Betty Shabazz? That is Black power. So what it did to Eldridge, he just froze. He had never seen anything so beautiful. I'm actually quoting him. So he definitely wanted to be a part of this organization. And this is how it relates somewhat to what you just talked about, Neff. Eldridge was single at the time. And Huey Newton soon after had a shootout, if you will, with some police people who shot at him And all Panthers, if you are shot at, you are to shoot back. You don't run, you don't cower. If they beat you with a billy club, well, you pick out your weapon and you beat them back. This is what we did. This is what we learned. So, in any event, Huey was accused of shooting two policemen, and he was, of course, hauled off to jail. Eldridge is in the Black Panther Party. So he knew he was the, what was he, communication minister of information. So he knew he had to get more people who had skills to join the Black Panther Party. So he was invited to this school. I forgot what the university was. And he was to speak about what was going on with the Black Panther Party. Well, he met this sister. Her name was Kathleen Neal. Okay, she was beautiful. She had a big bush like Angela Davis and the rest of the stuff. Anyway, she was like his host. Now he's checking her out because she's fine. All right. But he's also listening to how articulate she is. He can tell this is a very smart sister. We could use her in the Black Panther Party for self-defense. So he wooed Kathleen, and he was able to convince her to come to Oakland, California, to help him develop a campaign to free Huey P. Newton. And of course, they were married and all this kind of stuff. It's a long story. What is my point here? Eldridge, like all of us, the movement came before anything else. How he chose his mate was based upon she would be good for the party. And on a more even personal experience, when I hit Oakland, California and joined the Black Panther Party, I worked for Kathleen Cleaver. I had never seen a woman like Kathleen Cleaver. Never. I had never been around very intelligent Black women who were articulate and who were brave. So I would just watch her every movement. You know, I typed her speeches for her. But my point here is how Eldridge chose his mate was based upon the empowerment, the improvement, and how we were going to get Huey P. Newton out of jail. Understand this, people. We're talking 1966, 67, 68, 69. A brother accused of shooting back at police, they got the gas chamber. They got the gas chamber immediately. But this is also what we knew and what we learned in the Black Panther Party. Huey was going to be free. Huey was going to be free. Huey was going to be free. We were going to free Huey. And guess what, Black people in particular? We did. We goddamn did. See, I've seen miracles. I'm so happy I'm actually still on earth just to be able to tell you that I have seen when it looks like everything is going to fall apart, you know. Now, we could have cried, oh God, Huey's in jail. Oh, screw that. We hit them Oakland streets and the Oakland community already loved Huey. You know, so when we said free Huey, they said, right on, we're going to free Huey. And what I didn't know at the time, Neff, because I was rank and file. I was not an officer. I was rank and file, very low level, but still a soldier. The higher ups in the party, them brothers and sisters were planning a helicopter drop on the prison to release you. Now I found all of this out much later. That we were going to free Huey. Huey was not going to go to the gas chamber. All right. The poets started writing poetry about Huey. We would recite the poetry on corners. You know, I mean, it was the Black community in particular coming together in a way that I am so happy that I got a chance to witness and be a participant in. I mean, it would be brothers on crutches, brothers in wheelchairs talking about, we gonna free you. I'm like, right on, yeah, we freeing you. We getting that motherfucker out of jail. I'm actually using the language that we used at the time. All right, so understand that. Point though, we could have fallen into a kind of despair, okay? Wondering, oh, can we do it? Oh, maybe not. Oh, God. We didn't go that way. We went, we are going to free Huey, or the sky is the limit. We would have tore this country. I'm telling you, we would have tore this country. If they had even said gas chamber, all right? America might not be the America that we have right now. And I'm explaining it in those terms because I want you who are listening to understand the power, all right, of a made up mind. When you make up your mind and you decide with conviction, this has to be, when you know that justice is on your side. For us, when we knew Huey Newton was showing us how to deal with these awful people that had been beating us, lynching us, Jim Crowing us, doing whatever the hell they wanted to do for us for over 3 centuries. And you're going to try to deal with these people, negotiate with these devils? No way. No way. And we did free Huey. So I wanted to just show how Eldridge Cleaver, he chose his wife because of her skills, and probably because she was cute too, but because of her skills that he knew he could use in the Black Panther Party to help free Huey P. Newton. And we did.
Ashe. Thanks, Mama Regina. Um, I feel like it's important for us to also touch on personal sovereignty, right? Because in order for us to move towards collective sovereignty, we have to, and in order for us to wield power, right? To wield power, you have to be sovereign. You have to have that authority and autonomy of your own power. And unfortunately, we have so many different things that are funneling. There's so many ways that we're leaking power. There's so many ways that we're just giving away our power. You know, one of the ways that I always like to speak about the power dynamic in the collective right now is that we're dealing with a parasitic entity, right? The power that exists is always in the people, with the people. The people have the power. However, the people have been convinced that they don't have the power, right? So that the parasites can suck the power that you have and use that power against you. So we have to be unapologetically convicted in taking and retrieving the power that we have within ourselves and navigating that subconscious world, all those beliefs and thoughts and things that keep us away from our power, right? The fears that we may have about our power, right? Because we're so powerful that it's scary. Like that's so true. And I can speak on that personally. Like for me to get to the point where I am right now today, to carry the power that I have, the power in my womb, even, it took so much sacrifice. It took a lot of experience to gain the wisdom to also prove to myself that I was worthy of my own power because of coming into the world with all of these things that have been imposed on us. So I just want to acknowledge that our personal sovereignty is very, very significant to our process of liberation and having creating collective sovereignty. So we have to be able to see within ourselves our capacity for power, the power that's innate within us. Because whenever people say the powers that be, or I used to say the powers that shouldn't be. And then I remember Ma'a, who is Dr. Sebi's wife, has said to me, she's like, they have no power. And I was like, well, I got to figure out another way to say it. And that's when I had to land on the parasites, right? Because even ancestrally, when we look at what their energy represents as far as the parasitic force, right? And I'm talking about energy. It doesn't matter color, race, creed. Parasitic energy is what it is, right? We're talking about an unnecessary evil, right? An extractive force, a death obsessed force, right? A diabolical force, truly. When we look at the level of evil that exists on the planet right now, that is perpetuated by this power structure. So it's very important for us to recognize that there's so much ancestral wisdom that we have to guide us to sovereignty, right? There's a reason why we carved it into stone so that you could still see it today. There's a reason why, because we knew we would be here, because we knew we moved through these cycles of time, and everything's going to come back around. So when Hatshepsut had to eject the Hyksos out of Kemet, the invaders, Hatshepsut also knew Hatshepsut was going to come back. And what is carved in stone? She was going to come back to what? To restore that which was in ruin and make it more beautiful than it was before. So we have to recognize that ancestrally we had a symbol for the force of evil that we're dealing with today called Apep. And it was literally a parasitic energy. It was shown as a serpent that was parasitic, the enemy of Ra, the enemy of the sun. I don't think it can get more transparent than that. The enemy of the sun, right? I think in one of our nature episode 3, we talked about the climate change narrative and how the sustainable development agenda is essentially Black genocide. But not only Black genocide, we're talking about reducing the carbon on the planet. We talked about that, and we talked about the villainization of the sun in that narrative, right? So it's important to recognize this is an anti-solar principle, and we are solar powered people on a solar powered planet. So as the first original people of the planet, as the first farmers and gardeners and stewards of the land, we have a responsibility, we have a duty, we have the power and the authority to steward this land, to restore this land, and specifically to restore our legacy. So it begins inside of us, with each of us doing that journey to heal within ourselves so that we can carry the power. It's a journey of purification because we're in a degenerate cycle. So we knew, and this is why I'm bringing us back to Apep, because Apep is the energy of the eclipse. Okay. And it's interesting because if you're watching this live or you're watching this in real time, around the time that this is being recorded, we are about to approach eclipse season in October. Eclipse season is when, and we're literally, if you're in the divided states, in some parts, Mexico, some parts of the Caribbean even, you'll be able to actually see the eclipse that takes place in October. And it's actually, one of them is going to be a ring of fire eclipse. So this eclipse season is going to be very, very powerful. Eclipse season is when what? You have that dynamic at the new moon or the full moon, because you can have a solar eclipse. Well, we will have a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse. And that's when that synchronicity happens between the sun, the moon, and the planet, Earth, Geb. And that synchronicity creates that shadow dynamic where it appears, because in our mythology, right, in our symbolism, we always depicted that the energy of the sun, Ra, had to battle Apep every night and go through the 12 hours of the night in order to emerge victorious every day and rise. And then when you had that eclipse was when the battle was happening, and it seemed like Apep had overcome Ra. So you have that blocking of the sun, right? So this is a very significant dynamic that we have to look at ancestrally, that is also a guide to our sovereignty. Because in order for us to go to battle with Apep, it is Set and Heru. And we've talked about some of these energies before, but if it's your first time here, Set and Heru, we're talking about the son of Asar, who his uncle Set killed his father Asar, chopped his body into 14 pieces, scattered them. And when his wife Ast and sister Nebetet find the pieces of the body, Ast fashions his phallus, because the 13 pieces, we talked about how in the last episode, I believe, how the 13 pieces represent the 13 colonies that the European parasites carved the continent into. Putting those pieces back together, the phallic piece, right, his henenum, his phallus, his erection, that she had to fashion out of clay because it was swallowed by a fish in the Nile, in the Hapi. That representing the diaspora of the children of Africa. And when she does this ritual, he is resurrected, impregnates her. She gives birth to Heru, their son, who avenges his father's death, goes to war with his uncle Set, which represents the gravity, right? Heru represents the levity. Our higher self goes to battle with our lower self. And before our lower self can defeat, before our higher self can defeat the lower self, his mother, Ast, comes in and intervenes and says, you cannot kill your uncle. He is a necessary force in the universe. If you kill him, there is no Ma'at. We have to have order, right? Because we need gravity, right? So gravity allows us to have strength. We build muscle because we resist gravity. So we have to resist that force, that opposition. That opposition is purposeful. We can't just not want it to exist. We can't want to destroy it. But what happens is he overpowers his uncle, takes his rightful seat on the throne. So he takes his sovereignty. He takes the authority of the land, his rightful position. That's when your higher self takes the seat, right? And you put your lower self in the back seat, your ego in the back seat. And then the two of them come together in union, which is called Smaitawi, when your higher and lower self come together in order to battle the enemy of the sun, Apep, this parasitic, unnecessary evil must be destroyed. You're going to have to employ both your ego and your higher self and be whole, be integrated fully in yourself. That's the journey. That's the battle. That's when we say revolution is healing, liberation, restoration, elevation, expansion. You have to begin with the healing, the integrating, put back together the pieces of your body, because it's not just the macrocosm of Africa, it's also the microcosm of the self. Because remember, the ego is the illusion of the separate self. And I also think it's important for us to look at that, because so many of us see it as black and white, and we see the European as the opposition, because it is the embodiment and crystallization of Setian energy, right? We see that pretty directly, especially when we talk about the sun, right? And the fact that they can get burned by the sun, and the sun is actually more hostile in the case of their lack of carbon compound known as melanin, as they call it. So there's a reality to that. There's a biological, biochemical reality to that. Now, it's not that cut and dry, but we do have to look at that reality and recognize that before we make union and alliances with anyone else, we first have to make union within ourselves. We have to put our pieces back together. We have to resurrect ourselves. We have to birth Heru. We have to birth our victory before we make that alliance. And that's the order, right? Ma'at, right? Everything in our nature that models to us is about order, right? It's about this cosmic order. We're in a solar system, right? Our planets are in order. These are energy spheres that have a dynamic and a beautiful organization. And the only reason why that's necessary is because APEP exists, and APEP is chaos. If you have no chaos, there's no need for order. So that's the universal force of complementary energy that exists, even on the highest universal level that we can see scientifically. We have the great repeller and the great attractor, huge universal forces that most of us can't even conceptualize in our human brains. So I think that these are aspects of sovereignty that are on the overarching spiritual front, because we have to recognize holistically as Africans, our cosmic perspective on sovereignty, on anything really, is that spirit, right? The Ka is includes everything else. It includes the mind, it includes the emotions, it includes the body. So this like Eurocentric new age way of engaging with spirit, where you're trying to escape the physical reality and not be accountable to the physical reality because of spiritual things being more important, that is innately false, because the body is part of the spirit. Like, we're housing the spirit in the body. We're only having this conversation because we are in these bodies. We're born, we're incarnated, we're existing. So we have to still be accountable. And I know it's hard, and I know it's painful, and I know we've gone through all this trauma and all this pain and all these things, but yes, that's what we came here for. And we have to go through the inner work. There's no way around it. There's no transcending it. We have, the only way out is through. We have to go through it. So I think that that part is very important, because if we don't do that work, we're not going to be worthy of the power. And it's our birthright. It's our destiny. So it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of movement. The sooner we get our shit together, the sooner we get our shit together, essentially, is what I'm saying. So, Mama Regina, any thoughts on that?
Well, one of the things I thought about, one of the reasons that I know that there is unquestionably a metaphysical universal force that governs all things. I mean, I know this personally, from several incidences that have happened to me over my time here on this planet. One, when I was 35 years old, I'm 35. I'm going to school. I'm going to Temple University. I am taking care of children, my own and somebody else's child who was thrown out of the house, and she was about 12 years old and pregnant. And I had all of these little jobs like an immigrant. Just different jobs to keep everything going. And my husband, Vietnam hadn't done him any good. So I had a very, he went nuts. My husband, got crazy. Anyway, that was my state of mind. And I was very frantic. I was very nervous. I was doing some criminal activity as well, and praying every time I committed my criminal activity, like, Lord, please, now, you know why I'm doing this. I got to take care of these kids. And, because, I didn't want to get caught. I never did. Anyway, I'm 35 and I'm working downtown Philly. And I was working with brothers that did construction and building and all this kind of stuff. So there was one brother, he always asked me, he said, well, Regina, I want to take you out to lunch. I want to, and I would always say, no, no, no. So anyway, we were very playful. So on this one day, he says, look, you're going out to lunch with me. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Now he's pulling me. And I'm saying, look, I'm not going out to lunch with you. So, just let me go. He says, no, come on, you going out to lunch with me. He pulled me into the street and I was hit by a car automatically. I was hit by a car. Now, I remember time slowed real down. I mean, it was like real slow. And I remember when the car hit me, I went up in the air because I could, and I even saw the passengers. It was a white guy and a white woman, and their faces were like, you know. And as I'm going up, I'm thinking, oh, don't be afraid. I'm going to be all right. Then I went up higher and I saw the actual top of the car. And when I saw the top of the car, I then said to myself, still in slow motion, Regina, you've been hit by a car. You might be injured. You might die. And as I was descending, I thought, well, I can't die because what would my children do? And I hit the ground. Once I hit the ground, I said, Regina, you're fine. You're you're fine. So, of course, people they called the ambulance and the driver and his friend. They were so frantic. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I said, and I was like, I'm okay. And I heard my voice come back into the rhythm of like even the way we're speaking right now, Neff. And I knew I said, Lord, I've been sick. I said, well, now wait, because I was trying to figure this out. I said, look, I know I was hit. I know I was absolutely hit. I went up in the air. I was hit. What is going on? So I'm in the ambulance. I didn't even want to go into the ambulance, but I went. Now they took me to the hospital, and the doctor he examined me. He said, "Are you sure you were hit by a car?" I said, "I was, but I I'm fine." He said, "Yes, you are." So he said, "Well, look, should you want to take these pills, this Percocet? Because see, I like pills at that time. I was like, oh yes, yes, give me all the pills that you have, because I might need them later." And I was thinking, damn, I'm gonna get real high this week because I can now take off work and I could be home, So it's nice to be home and high at the same time. So anyway, to shorten this story, I said to myself now when I did get home, I said, now, Regina, you were just hit by a car. It's nothing wrong with you. You know that. And then it occurred to me, Neff. I said, yes, maybe it appeared that I was hit by a car. And maybe some entity held me up. I saw the top of the car and brought me back down, and I landed on the ground. Okay. Now, that's just one incident that told me early in my life, or at least it sanctioned something else that had happened to me when I was a child. I won't go into that. But I knew before even studying metaphysical entities or ancestral memory or ancestors in general, I knew. I said, this is something else is going on here on this earth that many people do not see, you know? And so from that point, Neff, I knew that I wanted to study the invisible because I also knew that if people understood the power of their vibration, and I went over this and over this incident and over it, and I said to myself, now I wonder if I would have had this wonderful luck, if you will, if I had said, oh God, I don't want to die. But my last thought before my behind hit the street was, what would my children do? That was my last thought before I came back into the reality that we are experiencing right now, you see. So
Mhm.
I honestly believe, truly, if you are willing to give of yourself, like The God that you know is here wants you to give. You may have a chance at long life and incidences like what I have experienced. Okay. And by the way, I've never had any pain or anything from that accident. And everybody, including myself, knew that I was hit by a car. And I got up and walked inside of the ambulance and, this sort of thing. So there's more going on here, Black people, than white American infrastructure. This is a country, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had it right. He said, white people are devils. That doesn't mean every individual white, so don't y'all get nuts. But collectively, these people are demonic. I want you to think about the war that this country is in right now, where hundreds of thousands have died and been killed, and more will be. We were in a war in Iraq. We were in a war in Afghanistan. We were in a war in Vietnam, where many of our brothers are on the street, homeless as I speak. They never recovered. In fact, I do wonder, all right, what kinds of foods, I really do, Neff, they gave these brothers when they were in those jungles in Vietnam. I do wonder, because not only did my outstanding second husband, he was fabulous, but him to return from the war and go into the state that he went into, the mental state. And I even have a brother and other friends, men, Black men, they came back from Nam and they were battered and blistered mentally in a way that they had not been before that war. And who wants war? It is only this country that goes around messing around with China, messing around with Russia, Iran, Iraq. I've already Yemen. I know that people don't even know that we're in and been in a war in Yemen and Syria. America loves war. It was built on the concept of war. Where are the Native Americans? Where are they? Where are these red people with the different colored feathers that welcome these mofos over here, thinking to themselves, oh, we have another version of God here. This is what they thought, right? But they didn't. They had set on steroids, all right? Because what the Spanish and the English and their followers used to do, they would kill 12 Native Americans, hang them up on poles, and say, yes, 12 is a lucky number. Jesus had 12 disciples. They actually did that. I got the books. This is what they said. This is what they wrote. And they were representing Christianity. So, what I'm saying now is this: to really be a person that believes everything going down in this country, you need to think again. This country is demonic. This country loves blood like vampires. Okay? They are
The
willing.
entity what it represents.
Say
It
that
is
again,
important
Neff.
to look at the entity, the corporation, right, of the
Yep.
Divided States and what it represents is
Yep.
significant, the energy of it. You said a couple of really important things that I want to touch on. First, when you spoke about Elijah Muhammad saying that the white man was the devil, and I know that was a huge aspect of like a lot of our movement. And now there's there's different sides of that. There's people who really go on the extreme of that, but then there's other people who really reject that. And I think it's really important, again, for us to ground ourselves, root ourselves in our own tradition as far as our language is concerned around it. Because the word Satan comes from Set, right? Satesh or Set-hyphen, right? The brother of Asar that I mentioned kills his brother, divides him up into pieces. What's interesting that you said was collectively, right? You're not talking about individuals, we're talking about collectively. But what's interesting is that for the most part, people of European descent do not do too much, take a lot of collective accountability, as you can see, because the usual narrative around reparations or anything like that is, I didn't enslave nobody. There's no accountability there around, because the nature of the energy itself is what we have to look at. So that's what I want to bring us to is set creates dichotomies. It's split. It's about separating, right? It sees itself as separate. And that comes from the wound of what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing describes in the ISIS papers as the fear of genetic annihilation, because of this being trapped in the ice, and what happened as far as, I don't know if you want to call it biological climatology or whatever, but the nature of the ice, even that book, The Iceman's Inheritance, is also a really good reference too. The nature of the ice and the nature of the sun are very different, right? The tropical environment, there's abundance. The ice, the cold, there's a lot of lack, there's scarcity. You have to hunt, you have to kill in order to survive, in order to eat. Whereas in the abundance, you can just go and get fruit and they're falling on the floor. You don't even have to pick it off of a tree, right? It's abundant. And the developmental psychology around that in itself creates something very different. And with isolation, that also creates an abandonment wound as well, because it's like, if you feel like the sun abandoned you, then your whole energy dynamic towards nature becomes hostile. And that's what we're dealing with energetically. So when Mama Regina was saying that, I just wanted to make sure that we contextualized it from that space, because it's very important for us to not fall into the hate dynamic, because it's very easy for us to adopt, for us to reject our humanity, because our humanity was taken from us, and we have to heal that wound from the enslavement of our ancestors, because we still have that in our blood. So we have to heal our humanity. And I'm glad I mentioned Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, because Dr. Frances Cress Welsing also always mentions how she learned from Neely Fuller Jr. that racism was a system. And that was her first time putting it into that context, right? And the ISIS papers, I like to tell people, don't talk to me if you have not read the ISIS papers. It's very essential reading, okay? Because the psychology is something we have to be very clear on. Now, Neely Fuller Jr. has what is called the 9 areas of people of activity that we have to look at, in which the system of white presumacy, right? This identity that's been created of whiteness, right? Because it's a presumption that it's supreme, and it's a system created to enforce that idea and to inculcate that into all the areas of people activity, which it has successfully done so, not only where it was conceived, but all over the world right now, because the power dynamic on the entire planet is as such, right? It's a declining hegemony, but it is still the dominant culture. I'm in Africa and people are Americanized, and that's the standard of what people want. So it's very significant, the power that's at play, the power dynamic that's at play. Now, those 9 areas of people activity that we have to think about, right? Because when we're talking about sovereignty and you taking accountability for yourself, sovereignty in these 9 areas are ways that you can practically look at how to be self-determining on a personal note and be accountable to that on a personal note. Those areas are education, right? You mentioned that earlier, Mama Regina. Why are we expecting other people to educate us at this point? It's just like, we're really in a delusional space if that's where we're operating at this point. I know there are people who are still there. And I like to see, that's the difference between European culture and African culture. Black culture usually innately, like the essence of it is whole. So we see ourselves like, I forget who said this, but someone was talking about how whenever there's a killing, and it's projected, it's like a serial killer. Everybody's like, oh, I hope it, if it's a Black person, they're like, I hope it's not a Black person, because somehow they feel that that reflects on them. But when it's a white person and it's a white serial killer, they don't associate with that. It has nothing to do with them. They don't feel attached to it. They don't feel connected to it. As we just mentioned, it's very difficult for many of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but for many people to even identify, and this isn't even just people who identify themselves as white, but there's people who identify as Black who don't feel like they connect themselves to the their ancestors. They don't see that continuum because they're adopting a Eurocentric state of mind and thought. So that's one area. Economics, entertainment, labor, law, politics, or politricks, as I like to say, but literally politics. I think it's also important. I think I said this before, that to look at politics as we define it from a state of power, because politics is not about the government. The government is an aspect of the political force, but the politics is actually just the organization of and the administration of the economics, right? The resources and the distribution and the allocation and making those decisions, right? That's what the politics are. So even, I think we touched on briefly on one episode, we talked about the plebiscite, right? And that being one of the elements of the 10-point platform of the original Black Panther Party that usually is left out, right? Because the plebiscite would be, actually, let's make a decision collectively and let's vote on the fact that we don't want this power structure over us. We don't agree that we want this governing body to be our authority, right? So that's an act of sovereignty. And that's probably the most solid act of sovereignty, and why we're dealing with so many issues and fragmentation and strategic psyops to keep us from being able to identify in a way that unifies us. So that's one thing. Religion, sex, and war or counter war. So these are the 9 areas that Neely Fuller lays out. These are areas that we can practically look at how to create sovereignty within ourselves, right? Across the board. And I'll allow you to speak on that, Mama Regina, but I also want to say that what I love about Neely Fuller is he talks about the universal man and the universal woman, right? The universal woman or man is basically taking us beyond race and the construct of race, beyond even our humanity, right? Because remember, we talked in previous episodes about our legacy as African people being a cosmic legacy, especially when we look at sacred Kemetic science, we're looking at our origins in the stars, okay? So when we talk about being universal beings, we elevate beyond that, but we have to go through the layers, right? Like I said, there's order, right? We have to come into ourselves as physical forms and beings, our humanness, our collective consciousness, our earthly physical experience, but then also go beyond that. And there's a lot of healing that we have to do around that. And I think the dynamic between Black and white, the struggle of racism and the way that has galvanized our energy so much is one that I don't think is coming from a place of sovereignty. I think from a place of sovereignty, we focus on self-determination. We don't focus on convincing other people anything. We don't focus on, and I'm not against reparations. I think it's a means to an end, but it's absolutely not the finish line. And for me, it's not necessarily something that I personally feel called to focus on, because I feel our energy needs to be focused on us developing and creating the critical institutions that we need. Where are our hospitals? Where are our farms and our grocery stores? How will we survive? How will we live and go beyond that so that we can create thriving communities and nations, right? So to me, that's the essence of sovereignty. It begins to free us to go beyond, and we can look, okay, let's go 10 years ahead. So we're not thinking day to day, paycheck to paycheck. How do we see ourselves 1,000 years from now? To even have that capacity, we have to be operating from a state of sovereignty. So I want you to talk about that one, Regina, but I also feel like you spoke on something earlier that I know you have so much wisdom around sovereignty, because you talked about your story as you talked about being addicted to drugs. And I think that that is one of the main it's a significant way that people's power can leak and be taken, right? To escape, right, in drugs. And that I haven't experienced that, so I can't speak on that. And I really want to know if you can speak on the wisdom of how did you take your sovereignty from that state, because that wisdom is very, very powerful.
Oh, my goodness. Um, let me see. Let me see. I had to get on drugs at a very early age because I left home at 14 and nobody came after me, you know. So I realized that I was unloved. Now, I didn't know history or Black history or anything. I just knew that I was not cared for. That's what I knew. So, being a naive 14-year-old, and I'm in the streets, I have to find a place to sleep. So, my choices were very sparse at that time. So the idea of taking a pill, because I don't even want to include marijuana in this because marijuana, you go up, you come down. But taking pills is more powerful, I'll say. So I needed to cover the pain of not having a mother and father, sisters, brother, aunts, and uncles who wanted me in their family. Now I had it superficially, but the Black people had to work, and we didn't talk much in our household, and our family wasn't close. It's still not to this day. um but I understood that later. But let me get to the point about the drugs. So when I took drugs, I felt really good. I mean, because the drugs would camouflage it, they would mask the deep, deep, deep pain that I was feeling, that I just expressed, to you and to the audience, of being absolutely, totally neglected and unloved. Now, with the drugs, especially with speed, which was a derivative of cocaine, and crack, you could you just felt really smart. You felt like all the dumb, stupid stuff that you were saying was really quite intellectually. I mean, it was fabulous. I just, so to feel good, because I couldn't feel good on my own. So to feel good, I took the drugs. So, and I didn't even honestly think that I was an addict. I did not recognize that I was until I joined the Black Panther Party for self defense. Because when I joined the Black Panther Party for self defense, I took my drugs with me. I mean, even before I, went inside of the Panther office in Oakland, this was just so funny. When I hit California, because I knew, drug dealers and all like that who were in California, because I knew them in Philly. So, I knew the criminal class in Oakland, so and San Francisco. So I didn't join the party right away. I would go by and look in the window and stuff like that. Um, but when I did decide to join the Black Panther Party for self defense, okay, I was still popping pills. And I found out the drug places in Oakland, California. This was so terrible. So I'm a soldier now. I'm going through orientation. I'm climbing trees and I'm learning how to fight. Mm. I'm really, learning guns and all this. Yeah, well, I'm selling Panther papers, and I would somehow sell them right by where the dope houses were. Okay. So I figured, well, I might as well go in and just get a piece of fried chicken and some joint or whatever. And I was foolish enough not to realize that the Panthers weren't stupid and that my section leader had followed me right into the dope house. Now he waited until I got my stash, and I was waiting for my piece of fried chicken, because when you smoke joint, you want to eat. So people who have indulged you, you'll really know what I mean. So I'm sitting on top of my Panther papers and I'm supposed to be out in the community selling. And in walks, Lord have mercy, my section leader. I was never so embarrassed in my life because he read me the riot act. He said stuff to me like, "You gonna bring the pigs down on us just cause you want some GD?" I it was terrible because by this time I was learning law. I was learning, the Constitution. I knew that to bring any kind of illegal anything on the party could bring the pigs to vamp on us, okay, for the illegal substances. So it was actually in the party when I started to really think about why I was getting high every day, because I was every day I got high. And it was because of the brothers. Then I was put on punishment. The punishment was like, you got to run around the corner 20 times and do a million push-ups and whatever the hell else they thought about doing, um, to really make you understand what it is that you are doing to the party that's negative. So when I was embarrassed because the whole chapter knew, I mean, it was just awful, and I begged them not to tell Bobby, please don't tell Bobby, please, please, please. Anyway, so from that embarrassment and even me thinking about what are you doing with your life? You got to change. That's what helped me to move away from needing to smoke marijuana every day, from needing to buy in speed. It was called Monster at that time, and Benzodrine, the bennies. It made me just look at how I was really living, and even wanting to get back to, well, what is Regina really like? I mean, because when you're high like that, you're not necessarily who you really are. You step into another kind of persona. So it was from that experience when I decided, okay, that I had to make some necessary changes because all I really wanted to do, Neff, was to free Black people. I really did. They meant everything to me. The freedom, the independence, the cultural connections, because I might have said this before. The founders, the original founders of Black Studies was Bobby Seale and Huey Newton at Merritt College. And that's in no book except this one that I wrote. Okay. Most of the books that talk about Black Studies, they say that Black Studies
Can
started
you
at San Francisco
for
State.
people who aren't familiar with the book, Mama Regina?
Say that again.
Can you read the title of the book for those
Oh,
who
absolutely.
don't know, who weren't
Absolutely.
able to catch that, so they can see and get the book on your website?
Poetry and the Black Panther Party, from ancestral memory, morphogenetic fields to hip hop. And you can see the forward is by Bobby Seale. So it's a great book. I look at how poetry affected the Black Panther Party. In fact, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale's first arrest together before they even started the Panthers was because of a poem. Bobby was doing a poem. It was an anti-war, Black man's anti-war poem against being drafted in Vietnam. And the police, now this is before the Panthers. The police did not want him to recite this poem. He was on the campus of UC Berkeley. And of course, the crowd said, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. Bobby, do it again, do it again. Bobby kept reciting the poem. The police came out of nowhere. knocked Bobby to the ground. Huey Newton jumps up like Superman, knocks the pig to the ground, and then the whole crowd, started to fight. Anyway, Huey was arrested. Bobby was injured, but Bobby went to the police station to get Huey out of jail. When Bobby showed up at the police station, the police said, "That's the nigga that started all this." Beat Bobby again and threw him in jail. So that was Huey and Bobby's first arrest together over a poem. And in the book, I take, of course, poetry writing back to Africa, and then I come forward. But yeah, Black Studies started at Merritt College in 1964-65 by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and a host of other Black students that demanded that, one, they hire Black teachers at Merritt College and they come up with Black courses for the students, and the student body was mostly Black. San Francisco State, that most of the books will say started Black Studies, they started it in 1968. Huey and Bobby did it in 1964, 65, before they even organized the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And this is another reason, Neff, that I'm glad to even tell these stories, because who would know? If you pick up any book now that deals with the origins of Black studies, they're not going to mention Huey and Bobby. Why should they? They want to keep them as criminals or enemies of the state. This is why it is so important that we must tell our own stories and we must heal our traumas. I didn't realize, okay, I kind of knew I was addicted, but I didn't care because it made me feel good. It took an outside source.
They made you accountable.
Yes. That made me
And
realize, wait a
that's
minute.
that's very
I,
important.
I can't go through life like this, but it did. It took an outside source to get me to look at what I was doing and to look at how I was living, and then to face up to what I was really feeling that would have encouraged me to need drugs in the first doggone place. And in
Yeah.
learning history, this is so key because I could then forgive my mother, who apologized to me many decades later. I could forgive my aunt. I could forgive my uncle. First of all, we come from a people that had to sell their own family members. Their own family members were sold. Now, if you live knowing that the possibility that your sister could be sold, your mother could be sold, definitely your children could be sold, then how the hell can you keep up a consistent love? My family, with all of their warts and faults, they had developed into a Black community kind of a family. I had a roof over my head. I had food for dinner, and that was enough. And that is a historical, energetic trend, if you will, that is embedded in many of us. How in the world could Black people keep loving fiercely their children and their children could be taken away? That's just so over time, you mask that love. You go into other areas, you go into other places in the mind or whatever, but you have to mask that love because to see your children's souls. See, we don't often think about this. Our ancestors saw their offspring be sold, and there
That
wasn't
is
jack
the
that they could
truth.
do. It was, and if they did anything, they could be killed. The foot could be cut off. The ear could be cut off because you were property. Therefore, they didn't necessarily want to kill your ass, but they damn sure could cripple you. They damn sure
And
could cut off some of your fingers.
I want to add to that because that's the tip of the iceberg on top of that. Because when you think about breeding and how some mothers were forced to breed with their sons, some fathers were forced to breed with their daughters. So
Absolutely.
that's also, that is the signature, that is the energetic signature and the pain that is recycled when we're dealing with a lot of the incest that exists. And to the point, like bringing us back, because I want us to be clear on the energetics of it and how ancestrally the wisdom that we have and being able to contextualize it and define it and narrate it from our own perspective is so important. When we look at Set, right, we were talking about the nature of the cold
Yeah.
and how it creates separation, right? Individualism, because you're focused on survival. You're focused on survival. I always like to illustrate it because that's why I referenced that book, The Iceman's Inheritance. It was a different case when a woman was pregnant in the cave in the ice. That was seen as another mouth to feed. That
That's right.
was seen. That's why the woman was not valued. That's why it's a
Hmm.
patriarchal dynamic, because the female giving birth was deadly, right? Like if I can barely feed myself and I'm not going to be right, that's why there was cannibalism even. And the first
Hmm.
people that would be eaten would be the one that could potentially reproduce,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And this is real. This is not some like conspiracy theory making shit up. Like, so that nature versus the nature of you farming and you want more hands on deck. So a woman is pregnant and gives birth to a child, that's celebrated. It's like more life, more hands, more help, more work. Completely different reverence for the woman. So yeah, I think that that's something that's significant because that individualism that's created in the Setian energy, right? That
Yes.
individualism of the ego is doesn't allow for what you describe, that accountability, right? That collective, even that familial unit becomes
Hmm.
individualized, where we don't
Hmm.
have a strong core family institution because
Yes.
everyone's out for self. And
Yes.
it's a survival mentality, even in the family, not to even come together as a family to survive. So there's a lot there. And thank you for sharing it. I want to shout out to Alexis at Genie Botanica. Shout out to all the other members of the Tehuti Ma'at militia in the house. I also saw, she said that, Regina, surrender is necessary for salvation. Ashe. And Sister Tanu has said another miracle. And I love that
Hey,
you were talking.
Tanu.
Yeah. And also, power is making a decision. Yeah, I think the choice as a expression of power is very significant. Our choice to take authority, our choice to take control where we have it, but also, as Dottie said, Alexa said, our choice to surrender, right? When it's necessary, because it's also that the humility as well. Um, we also have our brother Wale in the house. Welcome. Speak truth always. Truth breeds trust. Trust breeds unity. No one unifies with those they do not trust. No one trusts those that do not speak truth. Speak truth always.
Always.
That's sharing, Brother Waller. Yes, I think people have a hard time really discerning what is true because there's so many lies and there's one
Yes.
truth. And they flipped it around. They're like, oh, we all get to have our own truth. And
Uh-huh.
as if there's one lie. And that's
Hmm.
probably the biggest
Hmm.
lie.
Hmm.
But thank you for that comment. I also want to shout out Mercurial Lure, a tacit consent. Let me see, because there's a question here. Shout outs to Mercurial Lure, who's always consistent here as well. Was there a dynamic in ancient Kemet of the usage of the Ka and Ba connecting? Does determinism apply to choices or guides? Okay, I would love for you to clarify your question. I know I always say that. But our brother has um just simplify your question for me. Okay? I'm a very intelligent woman, but I want to make sure I'm clear on what you're asking me. As far as the usage of the ka and the ba connecting in Kemet, if we're looking at it from an ancient perspective, everything is connected. So the
Mm-hmm.
ka, for those who are not sorry, the ka is the spirit body, right? The emotional body, right? Our energetic field, right? And the symbol for the ka is like this. I'm just gonna show myself real quick so people can see fully. So the symbol of the ka is balance. Sorry, I'm like, okay, like this. The arms raised, right? A symbol of surrender, right? Um, Now that's the symbol for the ka. Now the other symbol for the ba is, and the ba is the soul,
Right.
right? And it represents the astral, the magical mental body, right? The astral aspect of our consciousness. And it was depicted as a bird's body, a falcon body with a human head. So that symbolized the ability of the mind, right? The consciousness to take flight. And symbolically, we're showing that we're speaking about something that's not aligned with the body, right? We're speaking about a principle that literally can fly. What do we associate the air with? The air is, and the air realm is associated with the mind and the mental space. So that's the soul essence. But yes, ultimately everything is connected when we're speaking from an ancestral perspective. So I don't know if you're still here with us, Mercurial Lord, but if you are, that second part of the question, does determinism apply to choices or guides? I'm just trying to clarify. Do you get what he's asking there?
Well, I know that I definitely don't believe in determinism because there's always choices involved. Nothing is absolutely determined. I mean, you can even if you get a reading, I mean, a reading gives you possibilities, all right? How you handle yourself on this plane of existence, that is the determining factor. How you handle things. This is what I believe. So, and see, determinism, especially with the way that I learned about it in school, and it was from a Eurocentric point of view. I mean, like, you were determined to
Yeah,
be a nigger. You were determined to
on it.
be a slave. You were determined to, not be equal to white people. I mean, so the idea of determinism is something, that I really don't deal with, because on this plane of existence, we can't know everything. And I think that's by design. I really believe that, we were sent here, especially Black people, to overcome a lot of things that have been impacted upon us. We have to overcome them. I mean, and it's like when Neff earlier talked about Set, okay? And the fact that our Set, yeah, she stepped in and said, don't kill your uncle. Now that tells me a lot. All right. So it tells me the challenge is here. One of the duties that we have on earth is to overcome challenge. And can we
Mhm.
do it? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it
I
makes us
won't
stronger.
speak. It
Look at who
does.
we
I
are.
won't. Exactly. So that's even
That's
why,
a
I
miracle right
told the
there.
stories,
The miracle of our
you know,
existence and our being here, still beyond all of that. We're still here. And on top of that, we're still making art. We're still living our best lives. Like,
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I mean,
Huey's
I
not
think,
here physically, but hell, Neff brings him up every episode. Okay. I wrote a book about him. Do you see what I'm saying? Malcolm is not physically here, but there are so many Malcolm X forums, and
well, you know
schools
what
are named after him.
they say you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution.
That's what Fred said. Fred is still here. So I think that, see, in the infrastructure, especially among the youth, okay, you all don't really know what previous generations went through. You don't know that. I and because you don't know, you haven't made that connection, because it's a connection that you have to make outside of what you see on television, outside of what you see in movies. And when you look at a movie, I want you to always remember that that movie either came from a book, and it might have been a sick book, but it came from a book, a script, or a play that was not meant to empower you. This is why you feel so disempowered. See, I came up, Huey Newton came up, Bobby Seale came up, Eldridge Cleaver came up. We didn't have TV and movies the way that you all have them today. We damn sure didn't have Zoom, all right? So we would reach out physically to each other. Okay, we didn't meet in virtual space. So it was a much more cohesive kind of community interaction than it is today. Today, our children are glued to the computer. That's not good. That is so not good for children, especially because it is children that this demonic infrastructure that really runs this country, that's who they're really after, the child. See, they not gonna, well, they have come after me. I've been thrown out of several wonderful schools, but nevertheless, I'm not their target. The youngsters are. They want to
But that's
screw
also, but
them
that's
up.
why you are their target. Their target because of your ability to. They don't want you to teach the youth.
Exactly. That exactly. Exactly.
But
So I'm not.
here,
Go ahead.
here we are in an act of self-determination and
That's right.
sovereignty, even though we're on them too. Nonetheless, we are controlling our own narrative, and we're
That's right.
creating our own way and method of transmitting our ideology, right? Our revolutionary ideology to the people, because like you said, they're not going to get it in the schools. They're not going to
Mm-mm.
get it in the mainstream at all.
Mm-mm.
So
Not at all.
it is very important for us to be able to use our voice in this capacity. And I think there's a lot of other practical ways that we talked about. We've mentioned Tehuti Ma'at Community Gardens initiative of organic food for the people to create a sovereign food network, but also the raw sources around that, like the education around how do we actually grow our own food. That's one of the key
That's
ways
right.
we need
That's
to.
right.
And if you're
I
not
want to show you
interested,
something.
okay, if you're not
Keep
interested in
talking. Keep
actually,
talking.
okay, if you're not interested in actually doing that part, at the very least, supporting those who are going to do the farming is very important, because we still have to be able to have a way of getting the resources that we need: food, clothing, shelter, security, energy, and all of that comes from the land. So our connection to the land, our ability to cultivate the land is essential. And that's one of the key ways that we need to be self-determining and sovereign. You ready, Mama Regina?
Yep, I am.
Okay. Are you gonna show us something?
I am indeed. We
Okay.
are beekeepers, and I want you to see who they are. Children. These are children who are beekeepers, and they sell their honey. And their mother was smart enough to write a little book about this. Now, can I can't. Can everybody see this, Neff? I'm hiding myself. See the honey?
Hold on, Mama Regina. I want to put you on there.
Okay.
How do I do that? Hold on one second. I want
Uh-huh.
you to be. There you go.
Mm-hmm. You see this little child? Now, this is a product of
The
a
book.
sister marrying well. She's got a very good husband who went out, got little beekeeper outfits for his children, for their children. And this book is in a child's voice explaining the nature of bees and how they produce honey and who the queen is and the drones. I'm showing you this because if you have children, start early. with giving them something real about the nature of growing things on this planet. And understand this, these children are also building their economic foundation because they're selling the honey. All right. If you can, parents, do not just let your child look at TV or be on computer. Have them out in nature doing something that will advance the planet and advance their intelligence and connect them to the reality of this earth. I'm going to send you a copy of this, Neff. And this is the book.
Can you
The
tell us though the author for those who want it? Because
Sure,
we're about
the
to have
sisters.
beekeeping at Tehuti Ma'at Garden, so we're really excited.
Oh, okay. Her name is Fatima D.L. Meki.
Lovely.
Okay. And here's her picture. Okay. And this is how I got to know the sister. These are the same children. She wrote a book called Our Grandparents Were Members of the Black Panther Party. I thought somebody sent me this. I lost my mind. These are the same. Look at the kids. Look at the kids doing the power sign. These are the same children that are beekeepers. Okay. And what is so amazing, this is why I really want our listeners, Neff, to understand that their life is full of magic. It is full of joyful, metaphysical magic. Now, somebody sent me this book. Our grandparents were members of the Black Panther Party. I got the book, right? Do you know I knew their grandparents? Do you know I was with their grandparents? Like, I did not know any of this until I said, wait a minute, that's Sandra. I mean, I was with her when I was like, I guess 18 years old. She had just learned how to drive and she was driving all up on pavements and stuff. We were out doing a Panther mission. Her driving was terrible. It was, but the point that I'm making here is I didn't go out looking for this. This came to me. And this is even how money just, I look up and I'm like, damn, I got money. But I do like Neff's model of a cooperative between different entities all working towards the betterment and the use of land in this country. But I wanted to show you these books because I saw this one first. Then I met the author. And when she told me about this one, I immediately thought of Tehuti Ma'at. I absolutely did. That wonderful
And
garden.
that right
Dead.
there is an expression of magic because
Yes.
that one night over, like from one day to the next, Tanu was like, shout out to Tanu. I don't know if she's still in the house, but Tanu is like, oh, they just offered us beekeeping equipment. And then she's like,
Oh gosh.
I'm going on Friday to go pick up the hive. Like
Oh,
it's just like literally it happened like that.
yes.
So our power to manifest, to birth, as
Mm,
like adamant about, us using that language. And I think that's very powerful, right? Um, just the birthing of our ideas, of the power of our thoughts, the power of our word, especially right now with the energetic cycle that we're in right now. So if
yeah.
you are tuning in here, it might be your first time or you're not subscribed to the channel yet. We also have another talk show series called Navigating Eternity. It's built off of our Navigating Eternity initiation platform. It's an online course currently, soon to be book. And it's all about how we can heal ourselves from the Eurocentric paradigm, linear time paradigm, into the cosmic clock of our ancestors. and looking at cycles of time, aligning with nature, and organizing our lives accordingly so that we can be efficient with our energy. And I wanted to say something else before we wrap. If anyone else who's here live has any burning questions that they want to ask, comments to make before we leave. Ah, Tanu is here. Yay. That's my
Hello,
sister.
Tanu.
Yes. So glad she's still here. Um, One of the things I want to talk about, because I've been saying, how some of us are really afraid of power, and I've been there as well. And it's something that I've actually just come through the other side of, just really, because life has initiated me into that. I've had opportunities where I've had to assert myself and learn how to take my authority and really learn to trust myself with power. I think our brother Wale spoke about trust and how trust and truth are deeply related. And it was my journey to embody Ma'at, embody truth, and be balanced and whole and centered within myself that allowed me to shed all of those things that were making me doubt myself and my ability to wield my power. So I want to say that because, we talked about 9 areas of people activity where our power is being extracted through intermediaries, whether it's religion, right, where you have to go to the priest or the pastor or the Bible, the book, whatever the book is, in order to go to the divinity, or you have to go to an external divinity, period. Because I always tell people that when we're talking about returning to a kinetic scientific perspective of our reality, we're talking about returning to the pure essence of energy and natural principles. They're not deities. The European has taught us that they are gods and goddesses. That is not where we were ancestrally. And for a lot of us, it's difficult to conceptualize the perception that we had ancestrally because we were in a golden age, and right now we're in a degenerate age. So we don't have the same mindset, the same experience that our ancestors had. We're not living the same reality that our ancestors were living, right? This is a whole different moment. So we have to really do a lot of purification in order to do that. And there was something else you said earlier. You were talking about Aset. And for those who don't know, because I always say Ast, and also my namesake is Ast. And a lot of people
Yeah.
say you can use it interchangeably because it's the name that's given to me. The name is given to me in Medu Neter, and it's my name, right? It's a remembrance, right? You retrieve your name, and in Medu Neter, there's no vowels, right? The vowel wasn't written because it was considered to be sacred. So some people interpret it because my name is actually Senetem Ast. So the Ast is just AST. Some people interpret that as set. The reason why I don't put that set vibration in there is because there's really no other neteru or force or principle in our tradition that has another energy vibration in it. So to me, to put set in Ast's name is very interesting. That's one of the ways that it's interpreted. And I'm sure
Wow.
there are many different translations of different stories, but to me, I don't know. I just think within the context of the story, right? My brother that killed my husband, right? Because we're also talking about energy. It's not, if you try to make sense of it literally, it won't make sense. But either way, it's just odd to me that the principle of gravity would be embodied in her. But I also get why it could be, because in some ways your ego or that energy can kill the ego of her husband, right? So there's different ways to interpret it, but I wanted to elaborate on that because you used that word and I used Ost, and I do want people to know that it's usually used interchangeably. It's just my choice to, when I put the vowels in my name, I just put Ost because I don't think Set needs any more energy, to be honest with you. I think we're giving Set plenty of energy. Shout out to brother Nazir. I haven't seen Nazir in a while. Blessings, bro. It's so great to have you here with us. Um, and Mama Regina, is there anything that you want to say as we're closing in terms of, because we really wanted to make sure people were clear on how to practically create sovereignty and self-determination. So I don't know if you have any other final thoughts or any wisdom you want to impart before we close out.
I just want people to feel their courage. Just be courageous. Just be brave. Don't fear the unknown or what you don't know. You know, go after what you want. You'll get it.
That's true. Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
why we say we're getting freedom in our lifetime. That's what we're saying. And that conviction you was talking about, like I'm not playing when I say that. But I am having fun to know. So yeah, it's very important for us to have that audacity, right? You have to have
Right.
vision, dream. You have to
That's right.
be
Mm-hmm.
something else. Like that's
Yep.
what the oppression takes away from you. So if we
That's
focus on
right.
oppression, we'll never be free. We have to focus on freedom. We have to see
That's right.
ourselves free. We have to know what we want that to look like. We want to live it. We want to breathe it now. We want to feel it now. Like I've created freedom in my life, but I
Mm-hmm.
know, and to a large degree, but I know that I'm not, as long as we ain't free, I ain't free, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, I can walk out and I'm on land. I can walk out barefoot and just look at the mountains and the ocean and like nothing's gonna harm me here.
Yes.
I can leave my
Yes.
doors open. I leave my doors open all the time with my iPad and my laptop and all the things. And
Woo.
it's a different energy, right?
Yeah.
And that's a gift and that's a beautiful thing. But my commitment is to my people. I always say, like, if Harriet Tubman did not go back, there would be no Harriet Tubman. There'll probably not be a lot of things. We don't know about the butterfly effect of her not doing that, what that would be. But there's an essence in our spirit
Mm-hmm.
that is wired for liberation, for those of
Yes, it
us who are
is.
called to this work. So if you do feel called to this work, if you want to connect with like minded, Pan African nationalists, freedom fighters, focus on liberation, if you're an artist, activist, or an activator, as we like to call it, if you're a farmer, if you're just someone curious, if you're on your healing journey, whatever that may be, and you're looking for a community and a space where you can learn more about our ancient tradition, learn more about the political reality and construct that we're in, and how to liberate yourself within that, free your mind. We have so many different programs and different things that you can get involved in Tehuti Ma'at. So I do want to encourage you to join the Tehuti Ma'at Militia. That is our membership program. And there are 3 ranks. For the baseline rank, I suggest that for people who just want to support the work that we're doing, if you just want to support. But also, if you're just on your healing journey, if you want to have access to the community space, you'll get access to the ARC, aka the Amos Wilson Collective. That's our collaboration with the African War College. And this will give you access to our private server. So you'll have access to our chat channels. You'll have access to our militia exclusive events and programming that we have virtually. So we have an Intuit Cipher every moon cycle. So it's the Saturday closest to the new moon. So that's going to be this Saturday, the 16th. We also have every last Saturday a community connect, and every last Sunday our warrior workout. And we're going to have a lot more other programming as well. You'll also get discounts on certain things at different ranks. So if you are at the Empire rank, you get access to Tehuti Ma'at Academy and our workshops and our classes that we put on. That way you'll have free access to that, and you'll also have access to the archives and exclusive content. And then our highest rank is the Galaxy rank, which is if you want to actually contribute to our cooperative ventures. So we have different cooperative business ventures. If you want to be able to be a contributor to those, you go through Navigating Eternity. So it gives you access to our accountability community program. You actually go through the Navigating Eternity course which Mama Regina just went through, our JED, which is our accountability community. And yeah, it's just a beautiful space. It's one of those things where it's just like if you feel called, it's because your spirit is on assignment. We say the militia is a force that rises within the masses to be of support, service, or protection for the people. And that's essentially the call that we've answered. My spiritual father, Baba Heru, had said one day, we need a militia. We need a Ma'at militia. But we know there's no Ma'at without Tehuti. So we had to marry the two and have them in Ma'at, in balance. So the entire essence of Tehuti Ma'at is really about the balance of the mind, Tehuti, and the heart, Ma'at. So if you feel like this aligns with your spirit, then I just invite you to join. Oh, shout out. We got another member of the Tehuti Ma'at militia in the house. Shout out to Kamal. Welcome. Glad to see you here. Brother Nazir said, love hearing my sisters speak. They just be so happy, knowledgeable, and optimistic. Give thanks. And Sister said, Tanu said, my commitment is to my people. Ashe. Ashe. So, Mama Regina, I want to thank you again for your energy, your wisdom, your words, your beauty, your presence, your existence. And we will see you all back here again next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, live and direct. And I'll see you soon, Mama Regina. Power.
Power.